Thank you for tuning in to another episode of New England Horror Files podcast. Tonight, we were talking about the conclusion of the Karen Reed trial. Recently wrapped up and fortunately come up with a not guilty verdict. This is on our podcast, though, is because this is New England and this is horrifying. This is absolutely fucking horrifying that this evil fucking shit happens in our government.
Amen.
There's no easy way to say it. You know what? Fuck it.
Dude. Okay. Yes. There is no easy way to say it.
It is what it is. They had a statement or something. They're like, oh, well, we're not initiating any further investigation into the murder of John. Okay, yeah. Shocking you're not looking into it any further.
Seriously? Okay. Raise your hand if you watched the damn trial. Raise his hand. Like,
okay. It's a podcast, so we can't see you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was raising my hand. Okay, like...
For the record.
For the record. Okay. So, yes, the reason we're talking about this is because this is New England Horror Files. We cover all things that are horrifying in New England, whether it's true crime, horrifying history, spookiness, ghosts, monsters, whatever. I find this situation absolutely horrifying. I have to say horrifying. So let's recap. 10 days ago, a Massachusetts jury found Karen Reed not guilty of murdering her Boston police officer boyfriend in 2022, nearly a year after her first prosecution ended in a mistrial. So she was acquitted of the most serious charges, which would be second-degree murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene after an accident resulting of death. She was found guilty of operating under the influence of liquor. She's on 1 year of probation, and I think she has, I don't remember if it's classes or community service or both. I forget. So it was funny because I've been kind of following the trial, as I've said before. I loosely followed the first one. There's actually a lot that I missed that I didn't even know that I missed until I started watching the second one. I tried to stay very much on top of it. And if you know anything about finding somebody guilty of something, you're supposed to find them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, as in, like, I know they did it because the evidence, there's not a shred of doubt in my mind that this person did this. Because the evidence shows da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, it's not the defendant's job to prove themselves innocent, or, they just need to show, like, reasonable doubt. So basically it's the prosecution, or the Commonwealth in this case. It's their job to prove guilt. It is not Karen Reed's job to prove innocence. Okay? So the burden of what is it called? Burden of proof is on the Commonwealth. It is like there's not a chance in hell that they proved in any fashion that she hit John Okeefe with her vehicle. I mean, and if you watched the trial, and there are some people out there that believe that she is guilty, absolutely, and there's a lot of hate going on. We can talk about that in a bit, but the prosecution did not prove that she hit him. There's nothing. There's no video. There's no, like, blood on the taillight fragments that allegedly were found on the lawn after the accident. There's no, like, John Okeefe doesn't have any broken bones. Several of the prosecution's witnesses were less than honest on the stand under oath. And it was highlighted during their testimony. Several of them admitted to not, or maybe it wasn't several, but at least one, and maybe two, admitted that their testimony to the grand jury was one way, and then now it's changed. Like, there's just so much. This trial, and oh my God, I'm getting all lost back into it just talking about it. So
it's infuriating, isn't it? It really
no,
is.
it really is.
I'm trying to just have a, normally we kind of have a lighthearted podcast and everything. And that's like my zone, but I feel like we need to talk about this, and it just hurts. It hurts. It's like it's so much stress to think of, the reality of the situation and all the pieces.
No kidding.
And what this woman was put through as well.
Right. Yeah.
Essentially, let's call it what it is: cover up a murder.
Right. I've even since, if you really want to get down to it, so Canton, where this occurred, is right next to Stoughton. And if you have ever looked into the recent Sandra Birchmore case, I believe Sandra Birchmore died, I think it was almost a year after John Okeefe. I always forget if it was a year. I think it was a year after. And ultimately, so initially they ruled it a suicide. The medical examiner said it was a suicide, but the family persisted. That the FBI got involved, and turns out that it was actually a Stoughton police detective. Without getting into all the details of that case, which is something else we should talk about, but a Stoughton detective is being charged with her murder. Her family was like, there's no way she killed herself. She was pregnant, like she was 23, I believe. And they're like, there's absolutely not a chance she would kill herself. You need to look into that. They got a private investigator, multiple medical examiners or physicians to look over the findings, and they're like, no, she did not kill herself, and here's why. She actually died of strangulation, I believe, and not, or maybe asphyxiation, whatever. The way they said she died, which was from hanging on a doorknob, was actually not how she actually died. Like, so the medical examiner got it wrong, right? The original one got it wrong, and there's a lot of pieces to that case that are just wide out there that talk about the crazy corruption and how things were hidden, and the thin blue line and all of that. Now, when you look at John O'Keefe's case, I remember there was one moment that I lost it during court, and it was when Alan Jackson, I believe he was grilling Yuri Buchanek. Yuri Buchanek was the Massachusetts State Police supervisor, who was Michael Proctor's supervisor. Michael Proctor being the lead state police investigator on the John Okeefe case, who had conflicts of interest with certain of the family members tied to the family who owned the house where John Okeefe's body was found on the lawn of. Right? He has since been fired for these text messages and, bad behavior basically during the investigation. Yuri Buchanek was his supervisor, and Michael Proctor didn't testify in this second hearing. He did in the first. But there was a point where they brought in these text messages between Michael Proctor, ex-trooper Proctor, and some of his law enforcement buddies, one of whom I think was his supervisor, where he just berates Karen Reed. I mean, he's talking all sorts of crap about her, saying all sorts of things, I hope she kills herself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a point where Alan Jackson just kind of, the emotion in his voice where and you could feel that he was fighting for everybody who has ever been the victim of a shitty police investigation. Do you know what I don't know how else to say that, but it just got me. And I was just like, damn, this is about more.
Heavy.
It's like, this is about Karen Reed and her fighting for her freedom. And, it's, if she didn't do it, which I don't believe, I don't know what happened that night. I have no idea what happened, but I know that there's not a chance that the taillight scratched John's arm like that. He doesn't have a broken bone. Like, you can't prove that that's what happened. It doesn't even make sense. Their reconstructionists couldn't even come up with a scenario.
Plausible scenario.
Right. They couldn't duplicate it. So I don't know what happened, right? But I know that I remember one time I worked this was years ago. I worked at a place that routinely got robbed. I was never there when it happened, thank God. But it got robbed one night. I came in, I was opening, and the safe was open, and we had to call the police. So they have surveillance photos, and they bring me this photo. The detectives, they take me out back. They're like, they had an idea of who it was. And so they bring me this photo, and I'm just like, they're like, who does this look like to you? And I'm like, so I take the photo, and I'm like, are you kidding me? That you want me to help you send a guy to jail, and this is the photo you're bringing me? This guy looked like every other guy in a hoodie walking down, Main Street. Like he didn't look like anybody. You know what I mean? There was no like distinguishing features. It wasn't a good view. Like it wasn't enough for me to be like, oh yeah, that's so and so. Like it just wasn't. And I remember them getting mad at me, and they're just like, well, you don't think it looks like, what about? And I'm like, no, like that's all I have to say here, because if you want me to send someone to jail, you better have more than this, because this ain't doing it. And it's very much the same thing with Karen Reed. Like if you're gonna, and since some of the jurors have come out with, they're talking about the experience and blah blah blah, and they say the same thing as, thank God that they did do the right thing with following the evidence, looking at the evidence, looking at the whole, everything, and realizing that if you have if you have reasonable doubt, you cannot convict guilty. You must vote innocent.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like,
and I'm glad they did.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine being a part of that and saying like, yeah, you know what? This really came down to me to do the right thing. You know what I mean?
Right. And even
but, and then you do, and then people.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do.
And what's really sad is that some of the jurors, I guess, are getting, the ones who have come out, because their identity is not a secret per se, because there were people in the courtroom like as trial was happening, but they haven't been released. And I do believe that the all the jury records or whatever are sealed. I forget what they call that. There's a name for it, but their identities are not, their names and identities are not necessarily public. But some of the ones who have been public, like they're getting, all sorts of hate thrown at them, harassment, etc. And like that's not freaking cool. You know what I mean? Like, and even if you go and look it up, I wonder if, let me actually find the statement. I have nothing prepared. Bear with me. So I just was like, we're just gonna talk about it. So Hank Brennan, here we are. He put out a statement a couple days ago. So it's been, I think, about 10 days since the jury came out with the verdict. And I want to see if I can find the whole statement. The statement is ridiculous because 6 days ago, this says, Hank Brennan's statement. This is from NBC Boston on June 23rd. Karen Reed prosecutor Hank Brennan issues statement on verdict. I am disappointed. Special prosecutor said that his investigation led him to believe that Reed and no one else was responsible for John O'Keefe's death. Special prosecutor Hank Brennan broke his silence on the Karen Reed verdict, weighing in on the verdict and the fallout. What the heck is his darn statement? Okay, here it is. Yeah, because there's like all this other shit, like where they explain the statement. I just want the damn statement. All right. I am disappointed in the verdict and the fact that we could not achieve justice for John Okeefe and his family. District Attorney Michael Morrissey appointed me, giving me full discretion to independently assess the case and follow the evidence, no matter where it led. After an independent and thorough review of all evidence, I concluded that the evidence led to one person and only one person. Neither the closed federal investigation nor my independent review led me to identify any other possible suspect or person responsible for the death of John Okeefe. The campaign of intimidation and abuse that has been waged, funded, and promoted in the public and on social media is the antithesis of justice. If this type of conduct becomes commonplace, it will threaten the integrity of our judicial system, affecting both victims and criminally accused. We cannot condone witness abuse, causing participants to worry for their own safety or that of their families. It is my hope that with the verdict, the witnesses and their families will be left alone. The harassment of these innocent victims and family members is deplorable and should never happen again in a case in this Commonwealth. My heartfelt condolences to the Okeefe family and faith that over the coming years they will find peace and closure. Hank Brennan. So first of all, you can't, as a person of the law and, like the prosecutor, you can't say you're disappointed in the verdict. Like, the jury has spoken. I should actually, let me read Alan Jackson's response. Where is it? Oops. To Hank Brennan. Before we discuss, let's read this. Yeah, Alan Jackson's all like, his closing statement, by the way, bro. I have to say, like, I was crying during that. Like, that closing statement was amazing. Hold on, I'm trying to find the whole. There was no collision. There was no collision. There was no collision. Oh my gosh, come on. This is NBC Boston also. Okay. This is Karen Reed's attorney, Alan Jackson's full statement in response to Hank Brennan's statement that we just read. The jury has spoken, but Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan, in an egregious breach of prosecutorial ethics, has tried to publicly shame and discredit that very jury. For him to attempt to supplant his personal views for that of the jury is a desperate attempt to save face in the wake of a unanimous rejection of the prosecution's case. The rules of professional conduct are clear. A prosecutor should support the legitimacy of the justice system and promote public confidence in its operations. Openly attacking a jury's verdict because he disagrees with it undermines the centuries-old edict. Mr. Brennan claims that his investigation was thorough. If that were true, the Commonwealth would have uncovered what we, the defense, uncovered: hidden exculpatory evidence, lies and perjury by the Commonwealth's own witnesses, cops covering for other cops, a biased and corrupt lead investigator with personal ties to witnesses, and inculpatory and suspicious conduct by myriad witnesses. The only job of an ethical prosecutor is to seek the truth in a just and fair manner. The Commonwealth fell wildly short of that responsibility. Theirs was not an effort to find justice for John Okeefe. Rather, it was a personal vendetta against Karen Reed by DA Michael Morrissey and his handpicked prosecutors, and it cost the people of Norfolk County millions. The fact is, Karen Reed is factually innocent, and this case never should have gone to trial in the first place. This case is a stark reminder that there has been a complete breakdown in what is supposed to be our justice system. Those in power are more interested in protecting themselves than the citizens that they are sworn to protect. The Commonwealth's defamatory public comment ring hollow in the very constituents they are supposed to serve. It is now crystal clear that disgraced DA Michael Morrissey has no interest in actually seeking justice for John Okeefe by identifying and prosecuting the real killer or killers. The Commonwealth would rather simply condemn the jury and its fair and lawful verdict. We are thankful for the jury's commitment to truth and that they found their way to a just verdict. But make no mistake, if DA Michael Morrissey had his way, the truth would never have come out in this case. It would have been lost somewhere in private and deleted conversations that would never have seen the light of day. Corruption like this doesn't happen in isolation. How many innocent people have been railroaded because of the failures in our judicial system? We as citizens must demand more of our institutions. Damn, Jackson. But no shit, there's so much in this case that wouldn't have come out. What's that?
So thank you for saying it.
No shit. Dude, like, I mean, I know people who are currently being railroaded by the system. Like, I, as a teenager, was railroaded by the system. You know, like this, it's unfortunate that, like, I believe, again, I've said this and I'm not going to get all into it, but I believe in every situation there are good and there are bad people. I don't want to just say that everybody who works for, you know, whatever institution is bad. You know what I mean? I don't want to say that. And I think people get personal. You know, it's funny though. I can break it down to, even in places like, I've worked in restaurants, and when you work in a restaurant, you protect your own, right? Like, that's a very small situation. So like, I can imagine as you go through different areas of like life, you know, in schools, maybe they do similar things with teachers, help other teachers, or, you know, I know that this happens in the military and police and, you know, all down the line. So I'm not saying it's correct, but these things do happen, and it's God. I have unfortunately and fortunately, we now have the internet, which the internet's a funny place because when they talk about witness harassment and all those kinds of things, like people will just come out of the woodworks, as we've discussed before, and they will go to people's houses and they will call people and they will email people and message people and like they will harass people. And would that be happening the same way if we didn't have the internet, where people can just be internet strangers doing whatever the hell they want?
Mm.
So I mean, that's a whole other aspect to this case, because you bring in as an aside to this, we also have the side struggles, one of which, I don't know how much we want to get into the situation with Turtle Boy, but it's applicable. I followed his shows. He does shows, I think it's every night, almost every night, or maybe several times a week. I'm not 100% sure, but he does lives about all the goings on, and he really, he really, like, in the court of, not the court of public opinion, but with his blog, which, to be clear, the jury wasn't supposed to see. So for all intents and purposes, the jury didn't see his blog and they know nothing about this case going into it, right? So, but his blog really, if you go through, I think it's called The Canton Cover-Up, and there's like 500 parts to it. He will just go and get information like that. He's a journalist. That's what he does. I mean, he's very good at it. And he uncovered, and if you look, he did a episode or a blog post. I keep putting my phone aside. I believe it's called the Canton Yearbook. And if you go through that post, it goes through how connected all of these players are. It's actually nuts. Is this it? Yeah, he calls it the Canton High School Yearbook Project. So you see that most of these police officers, they all went to high school together. It's nuts. Like, they all went to Canton. Yeah, he just goes through and shares pictures of everybody from like Canton in the area, and they all just grew up to become cops. Like, now I don't know all the, like, I cannot keep up with everybody here, but it's really crazy. Like, so they really are, very tight knit. They're, from the same town, and they go back. Like, we've got, yeah. And when you look at it like this, I mean, gosh, I'm looking at, Helena Rafferty. She's she was the chief of police. I don't know that she still is, of Canton, but she went there. They've got pictures of her right next to, all these other people and all these other players. Brian Albert. Oh my God. I think Brian Albert and Nicole were high school sweethearts, which is an interesting thing to think of. But yeah, so if you just look that up, I'm not going to get all into it because it's just too much. But you really can see some of the work he did to uncover just a lot of the connections and things like that in town.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And he was harassed, and it was some witness intimidation charges and things of that nature.
Yeah.
He was imprisoned.
Yeah, he was imprisoned for, and I don't know the exact nature of everything, mostly because I don't want to butcher it, but he's facing up to like 100 years in jail for, some of the work he's done, talking to people and going out into the field, if you will, to get just info and footage and whatever. And, I mean, he's often been referred to as controversial just because the way that he just is. He doesn't give a shit, but he's, I don't know, I've been following Turtle Boy for a long time. And when I found out that he was covering this case, and he he changed the way that the public saw it. You know what I mean? Like, and he found info that he would, turn over to the defense, and it was helpful to her case, and he was a part of that whole situation. And at the end of this, she's free, and he's, he put up a video the other day talking about this, and he talked about the prospect of being separated from his kids, and I just lost it. I was just like, God, this shit is so far reaching. Like, I'm a parent too. I totally get it. That's not a place you want to be. Like, that's,
Yeah.
So, in the end of this, and it's crazy to me how, are they addressing, if Hank Brennan wants to talk about intimidation, is he addressing is he protecting the jurors, or is he inciting more bullshit by saying, I disagree with the jury, or whatever he said? Or I'm upset, or I don't even remember his words, but that's not okay in my opinion. Like, even Michael Morrissey said the jury has spoken. That was his quote, and that's it. You can't. I remember this happening in another famous case, and I can't remember exactly what it was, where it's like you have to. The jury has spoken, and that's the end of it. It sucks sometimes, and if there's a big problem, you appeal it. Exactly. That's how it is. Like,
criticize the jury, like.
Right. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting to me. Like I've said before, I enjoy watching these things because I have a very keen interest in law. If I was 20 years younger, I would likely be in law school, but here we are. But so I think it's helpful to learn, because a lot of people don't understand how the system works. And I think it's important that we do. Like, I'm very, very huge about that. I think if you can watch a trial, you should. And I think it's important to watch trials, especially for something like this. I know it's difficult, and I didn't even watch the whole thing, but like, sometimes there's so much rhetoric out there, and you just need to see the facts for themselves. Because if you actually, I don't know how anybody watching the actual facts can be like, oh, she did it. There's not enough evidence to say that she did it. There simply is not. And even if you just look at his freaking wounds.
Yeah, people don't know shit. They just hear people say other shit and fucking jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah, they start running their mouths. Yeah, like,
sorry, like,
it's frustrating.
I like people from time to time, but
from time to time.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Sometimes
it is what it is. Like, we make quick decisions. We make opinions about things without having the facts.
Right.
We're impulsive creatures.
Yeah, I think it's exactly.
I didn't know too much about the case for a while, and I mean, I don't live too far from the town in question, so there's a lot of support. There has been too for the last couple of years for Karen Reed. There's a lot of street signs, flags, and everything, which is good to see, because a lot of people have but at least put it out there like that they're showing their support, and I think
right,
need to all be aware of this sort of thing, because this is how good governments go bad.
Right.
And especially just small town governments can be corrupt, as we've seen.
It comes down to governments doing things. It comes down to, I could give you a few examples of things that aren't supposed to happen. So, very small example. Where I live, I had gotten an accommodation for in Vermont, they're called assistance animals. And they told me on an official letterhead from the complex that I live on that I have to get permission first before bringing the animal onto the property. That's what they say officially in all their rules about this whole situation. However, legally in Vermont, you don't need the permission.
Right.
So like right there, that's not right. Right? Like it's not it doesn't it could, well, that could be a big deal to somebody, but it's not necessarily the hugest thing, but like it's not legally correct. So there's like just a small it's not small, but what I'm saying is like that's a thing that has occurred, like, and that's in what am I trying to say? It's like I don't want to undermine anybody's feelings or issues, but like in comparison to being falsely arrested, you know what I mean? But like these things occur where and people don't know they don't know any better, they're not educated. Another big thing I'm seeing recently is um so there's a very big difference between public and private, right? So for example, my household and my family and my household is my private sector, if you will. It's a private, my property, my effects, myself, that's private, right? City Hall, the school buildings, the publicly owned parks, the public library, depending on who owns it, that could be a gray area, but City Hall, schools, any public town-owned property, right? Those are two separate things. So my house or my business is private, if you will, and then there's the public institutions like the courthouse, the city hall, the schools, the public schools. Those are public. City parks. So city, municipal, town, state, federal, all of those governmental publicly owned properties are supposed to be neutral, right? And they're not supposed to be flying flags that are anything other than like the state and the American flag, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not supposed to be like, I can't go over there and be like, hey, City Hall, here's my flag for my business. Can you fly it on the front door? No, because it's a public. They have to remain, like, what's the word? I mean, neutral is the word, but like, they can't, I can't think of the word I'm looking for here, but like, they're just not supposed to do it. And it's not about like, well, if you don't fly I don't want to use a specific flag because I don't want to come off the wrong way, but like, again, no, it doesn't mean you hate my business. It just means that you just can't fly it there. We can't favor my business over any others. It has to just be neutral. The government is the government. It doesn't have an opinion, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like, but privately,
Supposed to.
so and so hardware can have all the opinions they want because that's a privately run. It's not a public thing. It's not a government run organization. So like, but people don't know this, and there's so many fights about this recently about what flags can be flown where and how and all these things. And it's not about hate. It's about just simply they can't have opinions. The town of such and such can't be like, hey, because that's the definition of what's the word? I don't want to say prejudice, but favorite bias. That's like the definition of, and they can't be. They have to be neutral with no opinions because they're not people. Like you know what I'm saying. So like, but I find that nobody knows this. Actually, I've commented this in several places because people are up in arms about it, and it's like, guys, you're missing the point. It's not about anything other than understanding what the law says, and people don't know, and it's unfortunate that on a whole we are actually very ignorant of the law and how we can navigate it.
Yeah, I agree.
What our rights are. I remember a friend of mine years back. He was I think he was walking home and he took whatever route he took and he got stopped. He was on foot and he got stopped by the police and he was like relaying the encounter back to me. And he's like, I didn't talk to her. And I'm like, what do you mean you didn't talk to her? And mind you, this was like 15 years ago, like I didn't know anything then. But he's like, yeah, you don't have to talk to them. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have to talk? Like, I didn't understand that. I was like, wow. He's like, no, she has no reason to stop me. I wasn't doing anything wrong, etc. And I realized, like, even then that I didn't know. So I think that just, I don't know, that permeates a lot. And we're seeing it right now with, the jury and whatever else.
Yeah, for sure. There are a lot of things.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there that
Oh, there is, yeah. So I will say I found this situation, this case, particularly horrifying because I have to say, like, John Okeefe just kind of becomes I don't want to say like I can't think of the right word, but
yeah, it just becomes invisible.
almost, yeah, like he's not, but like kind of like
He really
and
is,
I'm not
because the case has been so publicized, and then like nobody's investigating his actual murder.
then there's that, yeah, like,
and honestly, like, his family's grieving. I'm sure his family's grieving.
right.
And I don't know what they're, I don't know what they know, or, anything of that nature. I don't know how they feel about it, how they feel about anybody involved.
Right.
It's not for me to say, I just,
Yeah.
I'm sure they're grieving the loss of their son, and that's not what's being focused on. It's unfortunate.
Right.
Just unfortunate for so many things. It's just so horrible.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's sad to me that, like, John Okeefe is now just like a body in the snow. It's like they won't look further, and I don't know what's going to come of it, if something will happen, if the FBI is going to step in or not, or something. But maybe another DA will open it up, or I'm not sure, but it still ends sad no matter what. Like, and that the only way to get justice in some people's eyes was for Karen Reed to go to jail. But like, if she didn't do it, how was that justice?
Yeah, it's not true justice. It's just,
Yeah. So, well, here we are, and
I think we're gonna end our episode on that note.
yeah, let's end there. That's cool.
Yeah, we want to bring awareness to this topic. We've brought it.
Yeah. Yeah, say we've done that. Holy crap! So,
good evening, Massachusetts.
Woo! Yay, Massachusetts. On that note, though, like, Massachusetts is like one of, if not the oldest state in America, like, and has had some of the most effed up historically, some of the most effed up stuff happening. Lots of like layers of government and factions and wars and issues and this, that, and the other thing. Like, are we surprised that it's fucked up? I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of thing probably happens everywhere, but this has been, particularly.
No, this is like extra.
Well, especially
and there's a
public and.
Oh yeah, it's been worldwide. I mean, people are covering this from everywhere. It's a huge, huge case. It's huge. I just have to say that there's movies in the works. I just hope they get the freaking accents right.
Dude, I'll star in a fucking movie. Do a retarded Boston accent. Sergeant, look at the lights on the car. These are not consistent markings with what our suspect has been clearly.
I found these pieces of taillight in the snow. Look, there it is. Case closed.
Oh, we must have brushed up against the taillight, huh?
And he went pirouetting into the yard. God. Pirouetting into the yard? Are you fucking kidding me?
Oh my God. Yeah, I did like a pirouette. Yeah, that.
Yeah. Guilty. Witch.
No kidding.